At the core of universal design for learning is the belief that there are three networks in our brain that support how we learn. This section presents an overview of the learning brain. Highlights include an overview of the three interconnected neural networks and implications for the uniqueness of each learner. PET scans and other digital imaging techniques make it possible for neuroscientists to study the learning brain in action. When an individual is engaged in a learning activity, areas of the brain light up or show hotspots to indicate activity. The more active the area, the greater the hotspot is. The patterns of hotspots evident on a PET scan provide neuroscientists with information about the learning brain. For example, in this slide, you will notice that the subject was being asked to perform 4 different kinds of tasks that each involve words. However, the slide shows that the brain has a very individual pattern of hotspots, indicating that different parts of the brain are active depending on the task. Similarly, individual brains have similar yet unique patterns of hotspots, suggesting that each individual has its own way of completing different tasks. The brain is one big integrated network, but for convenience, we often think of 3 different groupings within that network. Dr. David Rose has identified these 3 brain networks that support learning as the knowledge network, strategic network, and affective network. The knowledge networks located in the back of the brain enable us to identify and interpret sound, light, taste, smell, and touch. For example, when you answer the phone and hear a familiar voice, you can easily tell who it is without having the person give his or her name. In a classroom, the knowledge networks are essential to learning. Students are expected to identify letters, formulas, maps, ideas, cause and effect relationships, and many other learning processes. Everyday examples of knowledge networks in action include identifying ingredients for recipes, telling the difference between shampoo and shaving cream so you can wash your hair, identifying the smell of freshly cut grass, recognizing the sound of pain or joy. Each of the brain networks has a UDL guideline associated with it. Providing multiple means of representation is the guideline associated with the knowledge networks. The UDL guidelines are not meant to be a prescription, but a set of strategies that can be employed to overcome the barriers inherent in the way that information and concepts are presented. Each principle includes 3 guidelines, and each guideline contains several checkpoints. This slide contains the guidelines and checkpoints for the first principle, multiple means of representation. The 3 guidelines include providing options for perception, providing options for language and symbols, and providing options for comprehension. There is a document that you can locate in this module that will also provide instructional strategies or planning strategies that teachers can use to align their curriculum more to these UDL principles and guidelines. As educators, we support the knowledge networks by ensuring our curriculum is represented in multiple ways. The first principle of UDL. Examples of how we do this include enlarging text to make it more visible, or highlighting or changing the color of text to draw students' attention. Another example of the way teachers can support knowledge networks is to provide or activate background knowledge. This is especially necessary in today's highly diverse classroom, where students have varied experiences and understandings. For example, in preparation for reading The Telltale Heart by Edgar Allan Poe, the teacher might brainstorm what students already know about Edgar Allan Poe using graphic organizers or word walls of important facts about him. Another example includes using text-to-speech or TTS software. Text-to-speech is a type of speech synthesis application that is used to create a spoken sound version of the text in a computer document, such as a help file or a web page. TTS can enable the reading of computer display information for the visually challenged person, or may simply be used to augment the reading of text. Another example of how we support the knowledge networks is using physical objects that provide students with an opportunity to explore concepts authentically, and using spatial models to provide frames of reference that assist students in making connections between known and unknown concepts. The second brain network, strategic networks, are located in the front of the brain, enable us to plan, execute, and monitor actions and skills. In learning situations, the strategic networks are critical. Examples of the strategic networks at work include doing a project, taking a test, taking notes, and listening to a lecture. They work in tandem with knowledge networks to learn to read, compute, write, solve problems, plan, and execute compositions and complete projects. Everyday examples of the strategic networks in action include cooking a meal, planning an outing, executing a golf swing, or driving a car. The second UDL principle, multiple means of action and expression, is connected to the strategic networks in the brain. This slide shares the guidelines and checkpoints for this principle. And again, you can get instructional strategy suggestions on the document in this module as well. The three guidelines for multiple means of action and expression are providing options for physical action, options for expressive skills and fluency, and options for executive functions. Another example is providing options for students to share their knowledge. Could be through an oral report, an essay, or multimedia presentation. Recognizing that no two students are alike, teachers need to provide options that allow students to demonstrate their understanding in a variety of ways. Another example is providing options for students to share their knowledge. Recognizing that no two students are alike, teachers need to provide options that allow students to demonstrate their understanding in a variety of ways. Finally, teachers can provide scaffolds that can be gradually released as students become increasingly independent and gain skills. These could be embedded prompts and hints in digital reading and writing software. The third kind of network, affective networks, have to do with emotion. What things make us fearful? What things make us excited? What things appear novel to us? The affective networks are located at the core of the brain and enable us to engage with tasks and influence our motivation to learn. They are responsible for developing preferences and establishing priorities and interests. In learning situations, affective networks are essential to wanting to learn. Visualize a high school classroom the night before the prom. Are students' affective networks helping focus on the algebra lesson or on the party after the prom? Visualize the student who has had years of reading failure in a 9th grade English class. Is this student motivated to read the Odyssey? Everyday examples of the affective networks in action include being motivated to get up extra early to wrap presents for a child, wanting to run to the grocery store to shop for a special dinner after a busy day at work, being nervous before a business presentation. Of course, the affective network does not work in isolation from either the knowledge or strategic networks. This slide shares the guidelines and checkpoints of how Principle 3, providing multiple means of engagement, supports the affective networks. As teachers, we support the affective networks by ensuring that our curriculum will engage a wide variety of learners. The 3 guidelines you need to consider are providing options for recruiting interest, options for sustaining effort and persistence, and finally, options for self-regulation. As educators, we support the affective networks by ensuring our curriculum is represented in multiple ways that will engage a wide variety of learners, the third UDL principle. Examples of how we do this include providing students with choices in such things as the type of rewards or recognition available, and the tools used for information gathering or production. For example, using computers, cameras or camcorders, paper, and pencil. Another example is designing activities so that students communicate to real audiences and that the activities have purposeful, authentic outcomes. A final example is providing opportunities for students to work in collaborative learning groups with scaffolded roles and responsibilities. Remember that each of the three UDL principles are based on one of the brain networks. They are multiple means of representation to increase knowledge in the what of learning, multiple means of action and expression to expand strategic abilities, the how of learning, and finally, multiple means of engagement to enhance involvement in the why of learning.